Welcome back. Do you need a little extra help with your money and finances? Maybe you need a financial advisor. With us today is Tage Cawley, Senior Vice President and Branch Manager, to share the 10 questions you should ask before hiring a financial advisor. Tage, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Sybil.
So Tage, what does a financial advisor do for clients?
Helps them grow their wealth, looks after their taxes, their financial planning, everything to do with finances.
Oh, that sounds good. I think most people do need a little help with their money.
Absolutely.
I also read somewhere recently in a study that showed those that work with a financial advisor have up to double the wealth that those that don't work with an advisor.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Well, we need to protect ourselves from ourselves, and we need help.
Yeah.
So when someone's working with an advisor, finding the right fit is important. What are some of the questions people should be asking?
Some of the questions that people should be asking when they go into I think let's take a step back for half a second there, Sybil. A lot of people don't understand that when they go into their financial institution that they should be asking as many questions of the advisor that the advisor is asking them. It has to be a relationship. It has
That
to be a
makes
fit.
sense. Why don't people ask questions?
I think a lot of people are just nervous and they don't understand or maybe aren't confident enough when they go in to meet with an advisor for the first time that they can ask those questions. It's their money. They've got to take care of it.
You know, there was another interesting study that popped up recently. I guess I'm a bit of a stats nerd here, but it showed that the average Canadian was afraid to ask for financial advice because their financial knowledge was low.
I'd have to agree with that.
So they didn't know what to ask because they didn't know if the answer they were going to get was right or not.
And nobody wants to look silly.
Nobody wants to look silly, which is why work with a professional. What's some of the questions they should be asking?
Well, definitely when they go into their financial institution for the first time and they're introduced to the potential advisor that they're going to be dealing with, they want to ask things like their background, their education, what type of business do they run, and is it going to be a fit for me as a potential client of theirs?
So what should they be looking at for credentials and experience?
Again, it depends on what the needs are for the person that's going in. Somebody in their 20s is going to have different needs than perhaps somebody in their 60s or 70s. So I think it's important to ask questions that are important to that individual.
So once you feel comfortable, you found someone that knows what they're talking about. So they've got the credentials, they've got the experience to help you meet your needs. Is that it?
No, I think it's important to understand their business model. Are you one of 100 clients that they're dealing with? Or are you one of 1,000 clients that they're dealing with? Are they dealing with something a little bit more conservative, and is that what you're looking for? Or are you looking for that home run? And I think it's important to interview a series of advisors to find out the one that suits you best.
Oh, so you touched on investment philosophy there a little bit. So if you're a conservative investor, you want to make sure you're matched up with an advisor who has an investment philosophy that aligns. But if you're one of those ones that wants to roll the dice and gamble with your money and try for the home run and are okay losing it, that's a very specialized type of a service, right? Not all advisors do that.
It is, but you mentioned service, Sybil, and it's just one service that an advisor offers. Most advisors will offer things like insurance planning, tax planning, estate planning. A lot of them will deal with other professionals as well, maybe accountants and lawyers. And I think that's important that as a prospective client going in, they need to be able to ask that advisor, who are the other professionals that you work with? Because you want to have that feeling when you walk in as a client that you're going to be taken care of by an entire team.
Yeah, and a team is really important. People don't understand, but just looking at the investments or just looking at the tax or just looking at the legal implications, you know, whether it's your will and power of attorney, if you look at those things separately, they may not complement each other. And in fact, you could be in a worse off situation if not done right. So making sure you've got a team makes a lot of sense. You talked about households. So what's the magic number? I mean, if you're asking an advisor how many people they work with, what's a good number?
Well, I find that most of the advisors that I deal with, most of the advisors that I talk to tend to deal with maybe 150, 200 households. Bigger advisors typically will deal with fewer households, but again, Part of it is how big is the team that's dealing with it. If you've got 5 or 6 people helping them, they can obviously take on more. But if it's a standalone person and they tell you they've got 1,000 clients or households that they're looking after, the odds are pretty good they're not going to be able to service you in the manner that you need to be serviced.
No, not at all. And I can just picture what the communication process would look like in that case, which is probably another question to ask. How often are people going to contact me?
Well, and not just how often, by what form too. And different clients have different needs. Some like to be just emailed. Let's face it, some clients like to be texted. Some want to be called. Some want Zoom calls these days. Others want quarterly meetings or annual meetings. So that's part of the question process too, is it's very important to find out what is right for you as a client.
And I think the most important part at the end of the day is to find an advisor that's going to help you, the client, achieve the goals that you have for yourself and your family.
You nailed it.
Yep. Well, Tage, thank you so much. For our viewers out there, we do have a document called the 10 Questions to Ask. So if you want a copy, go to thewealthylife.com. Tage, again, thank you for being with us today.